Hello there everybody, Sam Strains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I've got serious trouble with one of my locos and I'm going to see if I can do something about it. A little while ago I was doing a live stream and I was doing the old requests and somebody asked to see the Hornby Thomas running with a couple of other Hornby Thomas and Friends engines. So I set those engines up and sent them off around the layout and everything looked absolutely fine, except in the end I noticed that the Hornby Thomas's wheels were not turning. The other engines were literally just pulling him along and his wheels were not turning. So I investigated, I took him off and put him on the track on his own, and sure enough, even with a bit of wiggling and a little bit of nudging, absolutely nothing. Thomas was dead. So right there on the stream I took off his body and had a look and I put power directly to the motor, still nothing. So I removed the motor and applied power directly to it and nothing. And I did this all on stream, you can go and watch it if you want to, I'll put a link up there. And I decided, well, it's obviously dead, so let's have some fun with it. So I just let it cook, basically. It let out the magic smoke, so it was very definitely dead. And in fact, it was like a stink bomb had gone off up here. You can still smell it in this room, and it's several days ago now. Absolutely disgusting, and I think one thing is true. That motor doesn't work anymore. So today I'm going to try and fix it. Now, one thing I can't do is just buy a new Hornby Thomas. That would be an obvious solution because they're not that expensive. It saves faffing around. But of course, Hornby don't produce the Hornby Thomas anymore, so I can't do that. So my choice is to try and fix the thing. That's what I like to do anyway. So currently we've got Thomas in bits. He's still not been put back together. I've got his body here. Obviously that's not going to be very relevant today. We've got the chassis, which has had the motor unit removed. And then I've got the motor unit itself, which, I mean, to be fair, it's quite a good design in that this whole piece is removable, and so we can just work on this thing and rather than the whole loco, which is quite easy. And so what I've got to try and do is replace the motor. Now, fortunately, the motors that Hornby use, is it the M-type M motor, something like that? I don't really know what it's called. Fortunately, they are very, very cheap, which in some ways is good because, as you can see, you can buy them very, very cheaply. But then again, I suppose they have a tendency to fail because they are so cheap. Either way, I've got another one here. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think this motor will fit. I guess we'll find out today. And it should be reasonably straightforward, but I thought you guys might want to see the process, so I'm going to do it on camera. And if it turns out not to be straightforward, then I'll look a bit of a, won't I, at the end of this? Can I say that word? I'll censor it just in case. I didn't say anything bad, don't worry. Anyway, let's put this in. Let's see if we can get Thomas to work again. So I'm going to try and do this without really using any specialist tools, and then that way if you guys ever have to do this at home, you should be able to do it as well without having to go out and buy a load of extra gubbins to get the job done. So the first task is, I think, to try and get old Poopy Pants out of this enclosure here. Old Poopy Pants being the old motor, of course, which just stinks like elephant dung for some reason. I don't know why they smell like that when they burn out, but they sure do. So the only specialist tool I'm going to be using is the soldering iron, and I'm going to need that to desolder the old motor. So we're going to get these wires off. It should be doable. There we go, that's one out. Okay, there we go. So the old motor is now no longer soldered to the chassis thing, so we're going to try and pull this thing out. I think it should just be clipped into here, so I'm just going to lever it up with the underside of the worm and try not to damage the cradle. So there we go. Obviously we need this cradle thing. Yeah, we can't manage without. Another thing that we obviously can't manage without is the worm drive. Now you can get a special tool to remove these worm drives so that I can swap it onto the new motor, and that thing is called a gear puller. I've got one of those, but I'm going to just try and pull this worm off with my hands. Then if it works, then you probably won't have to go out and buy a gear puller, but we'll try. Let's see. I'm going to need the gear puller. Yeah, it's on there pretty tight. So the gear puller is one that you might need. If I can find one, I'll put some links to it down in the description so that you can get one yourself. But I'll very briefly show you roughly how it works. So the gear puller comes with a number of different bits. I think I've probably even lost some of them, but you need to find a bit that fits the shaft of whatever you're trying to remove. You know, this might not even work. No, I don't think any of these bits, the bit that fits isn't long enough to get down into the actual puller itself. So I guess what I could do is put a different something in there. Alright, we'll try that. So I've never done this before, putting something foreign into my gear puller. Might not work. I'm not using a bit designed for the gear puller, so this might not work very well at all, but we'll try. Yeah, no, it's worked. Another thing to do is keep an eye on how far the worm drive is mounted onto its shaft initially. There we go, that's off. That is not critically important, but if you can roughly match it on the replacement motor, then the performance stands a good chance of being decent. So there we go, that's the old motor completely free now, and yeah, it is almost entirely locked up. I think what happened is one of the brushes came off the brush spring and then just got stuck and caused a massive short. Yeah, it wasn't pleasant. So for this, for replacing the worm drive, I'm going to just clamp it in the vise and push the two together, trying to match the position of the worm on the old motor. And it was on about like that. So there we go. Now at this point it would be smart to test the motor before putting it back into the loco, so let's do that. So I'm just going to hook this up to a train controller. So here we go. Test. And yes, that is working, which is good. So I'm going to lightly lubricate it and then we'll work on putting this thing back together. Okay, so oil is going to kill motors if it gets inside and messes them up. So I'm going to have a cotton bud with me for this process so that I can mop away the excess immediately as soon as I've applied the oil. So tiny little drop of oil, move the motor around a rotation and then dab the rest off. The end without the brushes isn't that important, so I'll just apply a small drop and that should be okay. Right, so the next thing is to figure out which way the motor goes in. I'm going to do it based on these solder tabs and the positions of them, because the position of these tabs, you probably can't see it, matches the position of the motor that came out. So that could be a coincidence, but you know, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting it right. So let's see if the new motor fits. And it looks as though it does. Let's just position this. So first things first, I'm just going to apply a little bit of solder to the motor tabs so that they are easy to solder to. Try not to melt the plastic in the process. Okay, and that takes the solder nicely as it should. And now let's solder them back on. Okay, bit tricky to get these things in position sometimes, but there we go, that one's done. And now the slightly tricky one on the top. And we'll finish with that capacitor as well, just so that it's exactly as it was before. Okay, and hopefully then that will be a working motor back into this adapter. So what I'm going to do now is just adjust the pickups, because you could probably have bent some of them during the messing around. So let's make sure these are all roughly in the right place. Yeah, and they do seem to be. So let's have a go at putting this back on the chassis. Now this is a frustrating little process because all the pickups ping everywhere, so you just got to do it as best you can. So the back end goes in first. You locate the little lugs on the back of the motor, and then you just lower it down, putting the pickups into position as you lower it. If you really can't get this, you could remove the wheel set and then put the motor in and then get the wheels in position. Sort it that way, that does work as well. Okay, so motor screw. It's a good job I didn't lose this, because I took this screw out a few days ago when this first broke down. So let's get that in position, and hopefully, very, very hopefully, that is all I will have to do to fix Thomas. Hopefully. I guess we could test very briefly just to see by giving some power to my train controller and then just tapping power to the wheels. Not go too much. Yeah, the motor's turning. Give it a little bit more. Yeah. Great. So obviously, new motor, that means new run-in, so you have to treat this as though it's brand new, let it run in for 30 minutes in each direction, and hopefully Thomas will be good as new, but you never quite know about these things until you get them on the track and test them. So let's put this down on the railway and see what sort of performance we get. Okay, it is the moment of truth. Does my Thomas live to see another day? Let's see, give it some juice. Yeah, that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Ooh. Sounds a little bit grumpy, in reverse anyway, but that is fairly common. So, I mean, these motors, right, they might fail a bit more often than they're supposed to, and they might stink your house down with the smell of rotting poo when they do, but when they are working properly, they do perform well. I mean, look at this. Let's see if the crawls are pretty good, and it is. It's a 3-pole motor, folks. It's not bad, is it? It's very good. So, like I say, I need to run this thing in before it's, you know, safe to hook it up to some rolling stock. And I would say, with these motors particularly, you do want to break them in before you load them up, because that could contribute to the failures, I suppose. So let's set this at 50% speed and see how he gets on. Ah, so it's nice to see Thomas back to his normal self. Seems to have got a good speed to him now, that's at 50. Seems perfectly happy, the noise sounds normal. Yeah, I think that is problem solved, assuming the running in goes without hitch, but I think it will be alright. So there you go, that is something you can do at home. You don't have to pay to have someone repair it. It's actually a fairly easy job, and you can do it without too much specialist equipment. A soldering iron is definitely needed, and a gear puller is highly recommended. As you saw, it was a bit too hard to pull that worm drive off by hand. You can do it, but it's not ideal. I mean, there's a lot of sharp parts. You can hurt yourself on them if you're using a lot of force. And also, it's easy to damage something if you're using other naughtier tools to try and pull the worms off. So, yeah, a worm puller is definitely something worth having, I would say, but not absolutely essential. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed seeing another loco resurrected. I don't like having damaged locos in my collection, so if they all work, then all is right with the world, as far as I'm concerned. So, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Alright, just a short one today. Cheers, everybody.